Glad you all joined us. It is an honor for me to introduce to you a new friend of mine. And truly, I am more excited about her friendship than I am about her qualifications and her passion and her role in helping people find hope. We've done a bunch of stuff together because of our common passion for helping other people find hope. And so I wanted you to have an opportunity to hear a little bit of that from her. She's truly exceptional. So she's the outreach manager in Oregon for Hazel and Betty Ford. Her career in the treatment field began back in 2013 after her own personal battle with addiction, which you'll hear a little bit about later. Prior to that, she spent the better part of her sales and marketing career at Nike after her own successful athletic career, as I'm sure you've heard by now, 3-time Olympic gold medalist. Carrie got sober in 2012 and has dedicated her life's work to helping others find treatment and recovery and hope. Carrie has held multiple positions within the treatment field, including working directly with employers, patients, and their families to navigate the process of finding the treatment they need for sustainable recovery. Lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband and 2 daughters. She's an active member there of the 12-step community and enjoys spending her time with family, running, and triathlons. It is my honor to welcome Carrie, and I'll lead off with this question, Carrie, and I really appreciate your doing this with my pals.
Yes.
You know, we read the headlines every day: mental health, drug addiction, alcoholism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. A cure is near. Are we about to find a cure to all that, or are we in the process of trying to minimize the effects and help people find hope?
You know, I don't think that we're close to a cure. You know, I believe that, you know, this disease is fatal, it's progressive, and there is no cure, but the hope of it is that there is a solution. And that solution can come in many different forms and fashions, but there is a solution. You know, it's a bit like remission, if you will. And so, no, I don't believe that we're close to a cure. But I do believe that over the years, we've done a lot to kind of break down the walls of stigma and to publicly talk about this. Certainly in the sports world, as you guys all know, being in your world, more and more athletes are coming forward with their challenges with mental health and other issues. And what it's really done is it's really kind of forced a lot of the NGBs and the Olympic committees to really take a look at how we're supporting elite athletes, not just when they're winning medals and standing on the, you know, the highest platforms in the world and being broadcasted and being made celebrities by what you all do. Mm-hmm. But how do we keep them healthy outside of competing? And that's something new. You know, those things didn't really exist back when, you know, certainly Mark or myself were competing in the 70s and 80s, that's for sure.
What element of your history as a gold medalist, one of the greatest athletes on the planet, which eventuated in your history with the recovery process, what elements did you take from those 2 parts of your life that you can apply each and every day that helps you help people like me find hope?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because when I started my journey to try and find recovery and get sober, really everything that I had learned that worked for me to be an elite athlete were all the things that were really contributing to my, really they almost killed me in active addiction, because as you know, we're fairly self-sufficient individuals, we're self-driven, we work hard, we tend to not ask for a lot of help. And all of those things can get, you know, really got me in a lot of trouble as I was trying to find recovery. But what I was able to take into my recovery was all the things that worked for me. Like I I feel like I'm really coachable. And so if I had to reframe my thinking to help me get sober. And so really, but the truth of it now today is that my Olympic success has really given me a platform of which to talk about addiction and recovery and hope and families that I wouldn't have without it. So in many respects today, I almost feel like the reason the Olympic medals happened for me became very clear now, 39 years later, 40 years later, almost 40 years later, of why I was able to win those medals and why you all contributed to making me, a celebrity at that time. And was so that I could have this platform today to really serve other people and be able to share my stories. Personal stories, I think in any part of life are so, so valuable, and they really can resonate with people that are either going through what you may have gone through or struggling or hiding behind the stigma and shame that is so closely attached to this. So I think those of us that have had these challenges, I think it takes a lot of courage to stand up and tell your story when it's somewhat looked down upon, when addiction is associated with, the proverbial brown paper bag under a bridge and, homelessness and horrible people, when in actuality, I would argue most of you people on the Zoom call today know somebody that has struggled with this. We're your neighbors, where we are, where your kids come to play, and we are equal, contributing members of society, and so the Olympics has just given me this incredible opportunity, many incredible opportunities in my life. Without a doubt, has paved the way for my entire career, for all the places I've worked in the athletic field, and it certainly has served my purpose today.
How does it make you feel? And you and I have talked about this, knowing that when you wake up in the morning, as you said, you have a full life to look forward to. How does it make you feel, Carrie, when you occasionally take a deep breath and think, my God, I really am helping people? The fact that I'm on camera now, or that I am speaking at an AA meeting, which we're not supposed to mention, but whatever you do in the recovery process, how does it make you feel when you realize the value you have because of your prominence, because of your position, which we helped, as you say, cultivate, and we're all proud of that as well? How does it make you feel when you understand the value of your opportunity?
I mean, I'm just so overwhelmingly grateful, but I'm also humbled at the fact that people will turn to me and ask for help. That's the hardest phone call to make, right? I remember thinking when I got sober, if they would just tell me to go swim a couple miles or go run a marathon or go do something that I really understood, which was movement and being competitive. I thought, oh my gosh, sobriety would be so much easier, And I also remember thinking, if I could be the best in the world at something for that given moment, how can I not figure out this problem that I seem to have with alcohol? And, through a lot of work, as we know, Jeff, we come to those conclusions and we find some of those answers in the middle of that giant onion. So really, I am so honored and so grateful that I have this platform to speak about not just my swimming success, but this ability to overcome these really, really tough demons of addiction. And I'm just so humbled that people trust me. And, there was a time in my life that I wasn't very trustworthy and I didn't show up when I said I would. And I hurt a lot of people, and most importantly, my children. And, so that trust from people means a lot to me, because I kind of didn't have it for a while.
Tell us something, Carrie, about this horrendous disease of addiction that most people don't understand. I mean, you are a proud recovering alcoholic, addict, whatever you call yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us something we don't know that you think we should all understand, so that we get rid permanently, which I don't think will ever happen, but we can try, get rid of the stigma.
Yeah, I've been on a lot of teams in my life, as you know, and I always say that the team I'm honestly most proud of is this team of recovering people across the world. And I've stood on the highest platform in my sport, and I've also lived in hell on earth. And so I've seen this viewpoint that very few people in the world ever get to see. And I've also seen some really deep darkness that my hope is that I can help prevent someone from seeing. I think the most important thing is to realize that I couldn't even see in myself. I had felt like an imposter for so much of my life after the Olympics, because I felt like I was supposed to be the person that everyone thought I was, or that I should be, being a 3-time Olympic gold medalist, and really kind of on the outside looking like my life was perfect. But on the inside, I was really dying inside. And I didn't understand why or how to fix it. And so I think the most important thing to remember is that, that we're not bad people trying to get good. We do bad things in our addictions, sure. But we're not bad people trying to get good. We're just really sick people trying to get well. And sometimes that's not a streamlined process. It goes like this, like many seasons of our life. It goes up and down and up and down. And recovery is no different. This is a disease that unfortunately many people relapse in, and I was one of them. I relapsed many times, and I went to residential treatment 4 times in 2 years. And I remember when I first went to treatment in 2010, I got a tattoo afterwards with my sobriety date. And I always joked, because it's kind of down by my hip, and I always joked, well, it was a good thing I didn't keep getting sobriety dates tattooed, or they'd be halfway down my leg. But and I was going to have that tattoo kind of corrected or removed a few years later. And the tattoo guy said, why would you do that? That date is still so valuable, because it really is the beginning of your journey. And although it's not my true sobriety date, it is the date that my journey to find recovery began. So, I just think love and tolerance, right? Love and tolerance. When we when we proverbially step over somebody that's down and out, we're stepping over their whole family, my children, everybody. And so I just think that if we can remember the humanness of this, we will come a long way.
Mark, why don't you give us a sense of Carrie and how you feel about the work she does, and what would you like to know from her, Mark?
Well, that's an interesting question that I've never been asked. Do you think that had you not had success in swimming, would have you taken that same road, maybe?
I think so. I have immediate family members that have addiction issues, and I grew up in a house that had addiction issues. What I didn't understand as a kid, and really until I started to try and get sober in my mid 40s, was that I had a 40 times higher chance, just because I had the genetic predisposition to substance use disorder. Do I think the Olympics and the success of that contributed? I do, only in the fact that the pool kind of became my escape, my safe place, the place I could go and work out all of my fears and frustrations and anger at addiction in my home. And I could also, nobody could see me cry underwater, as a swimmer. And so, although it became my safe space, when the lights kind of went out for me and my career didn't end kind of the way I had hoped it would, I think that I didn't have a plan B, right? And I didn't know what I was going to really do with my life as I stood in the stands and watched the '88 team accumulate on the pool deck in Austin, which was where I was in school and training with all those people. So I think that a lot of it for me also was the adrenaline and the serotonin and all of that elite athletes really feel on a day-to-day basis, whether that's training, winning, racing. All of it contributes to this kind of all this really good brain stuff that goes on. And I really just didn't know, I spent years kind of feeling like a fraud. So I guess that's kind of a long answer, that I think that there were many, many things that contributed to my alcoholism. And I do think that although the Olympics were really one of the greatest things that have ever happened to me, I think really what I describe it as is the gold medals represent what I did. Being a woman in long-term recovery is really who I am. And there's a difference.
There you have it. That says it all. John, you have a question for Carrie?
First of all, thanks, Carrie, for being so open and candid. We all appreciate that. My question to you is relative to addiction, but it's more along what Simone Biles talked about as mental health. Could you talk about the problems of the pressure, the expectations of being the best in the world? It's not like once you get there, the race isn't done. A lot of people expect you. So tell us your thoughts about mental health.
Yeah, thanks, John. I think that part of Simone's greatest legacy will be exactly what she did at the last Olympics when she pulled out. I know when I woke up in the morning, I could kind of feel this like the world was holding their breath, right? Like, please let it be an ankle or a elbow or a knee, but please don't make us talk about mental health. And what Simone Biles did by coming forward and talking about her mental health, and we're seeing that in tennis players and other people are coming forward. Michael Phelps also did the same, is they're giving all these young kids the permission to be not okay. And they're giving them the permission to say it's okay to ask for help, which I know as an athlete, I never felt like that was something that we did. I felt like we were kind of expected to just plow through those things. And, I don't ever remember as an athlete saying, I'm feeling like anxious or depressed, or, my home life was a little unraveling. And, we just were expected to come and do our jobs and perform, right? And so I think that mental health should be at the top of every NGB, the IOC, IOPC forefront about how we're going to be there to support their athletes, especially now, John, because, back when you and I and Mark were swimming, you finished college and you kind of had to be done, right? We had to go get jobs and be able to support ourselves. There was no money to be made. Now you've got kids swimming until they're into their 30s.
I want to follow up because recently Cal Berkeley fired their women's coach for being a little bit too tough. Would you have considered what she's accused of being mental health problems, or is that the way we were all raised in those days?
I probably don't know enough about her case to be able to comment directly on it, but I do think that there is an old school mentality of coaching that we grew up with that is no longer going to be accepted. And that could be how hard a coach talks to a kid, or it could be weigh-ins and being in a fat club that if you're not at a certain weight, you're out running. Like, these things are not acceptable anymore like they were when we were growing up and, living in that elite world. So I think coaches have to be much more cautious. But I also think that parents need to have this ability to kind of trust and respect the direction coaches are heading in. So there's a very fine line there, but I don't really know enough about her case to be able to comment.
Did any of your coaches do or say anything that may have contributed to your problem with alcohol?
Never. I had one age group coach that took me all the way to college through the Olympics. And then I swam for Richard at Texas. And I never experienced any of those things from my coaches.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thanks, Carrie. I'd like to call on an old friend who just joined us, Emily Deutsch. Emily and I made a movie about Betty Ford and her role in in the field of addiction and alcoholism. Emily, your experience was unusually exciting for me to have your eyes opened as to the passion that she held, that you documented in this movie we did. And I'm wondering how you feel about people like Carrie carrying on the message, so to speak, becoming standard bearers for hope and good health.
Well, I think it's, after working for a lifetime in sports television, as all of you have, I just think it's, you just can't put a value on an accomplished athlete speaking out and being brave. And I just think it can do so much good and can influence so many people. So I really applaud you, Carrie. I think it's fantastic. It's inspiring, and it's really, really important.
It took me a long time into my recovery to really be public about it, which I don't really understand, because it's not like my fall from grace was a secret. You know, everybody I knew, my family, everybody knew I was struggling, but there was so much shame around who and what I had become. So by the time I got to treatment for the last time, hopefully, 11 and a half years ago, the person that I was as an Olympic champion and an athlete and an employee at Nike for all these years, and the person that showed up at that treatment center broken and empty and just devastated, they weren't even the same person. So for a long time through my work, I couldn't ever connect who I am as a sober woman to that athlete. Like there was this complete wall up that I couldn't join them together as the same person. And then over the course of the years, I was really able to recognize that, yes, I can in fact be both things. I can be a great athlete and an Olympic champion, but I can also be a woman that struggled severely with substance use disorder, but somehow you find your way to, that we scratch and claw our way into these beautiful lives in recovery. And, I went from that mentality of why me to why the hell not me? Like, why not me? I feel like it's my superpower, to be honest with you. Like, I've known a lot of strong people in my life and a lot of talented, amazing athletes and individuals. But I'll tell you, the people that are the strongest that I've ever met are those that have struggled with addiction and have scratched and clawed and done the work and found their way out, because this is by far way more hard. This is the hardest thing I have ever done, way harder than training for the Olympics, way, way harder.
And you are now beginning to understand how articulate she is and how much value there is in her message. So I am prepared to state publicly here that if I have anything to do with it, and I will, we're going to hear a lot more from Carrie Bates across the spectrum of media.
Years ago, we didn't talk about this stuff. My mom never was able to find recovery, unfortunately. And, she passed away about 14 years ago. And I believe it was a direct result of this disease. And I didn't really understand it. I just thought my mom loved alcohol more than me. Like, I would leave for swim practice at night and I would say, Mom, maybe you could just drink like when you can start, like when I get home. Or do you think maybe you won't drink tonight and we can like have dinner when I get home? And, I tried all these negotiating things because I just didn't understand the nature of the disease as a young teenager. And we certainly didn't talk about it in our home. Men could go get treatment and get sober, but back then women didn't even talk about having addiction issues. Like, we just didn't. And so, unfortunately, I lived with it and I hated it so much. I hated alcohol so much because it robbed me of what I felt that I deserved in a mom. Now, I will also say in the same breath, my mom was at every swim meet. She made sure I was at every practice, every morning practice, every evening practice. They supported me 100% all the way through my swimming career. So it's not like I grew up in an abusive, I wasn't looking for food. I had clothes. Like we lived at, my father was a corporate executive his whole life. And so if this can happen to me, it can happen to anyone, because I lived in it, hated it, and it still came up and kicked my ass 20 some years later. And I wasn't even aware it was happening to me. That is how sneaky and pervasive this disease is. It enters your life. It lives in the pleasure center of our brain, which is where we make decisions. Like, do you ever look at an alcoholic and go, I don't understand. Why don't you just stop drinking and then you won't get a DUI, or you won't be fighting with your spouse all the time? I mean, if I could have done that, I would have done it in 2 seconds. And I'm sure there'd be a line of millions of people behind me. But this thing affects our decision-making, our pleasure center of our brain, which is the same thing sport does with the serotonin, the endorphins, all these things that sport bring us as athletes. It affects the same part of the brain that addiction does. And so we lose ability to make decisions. The disease eventually makes decisions for us. And that's what you have to remember. What I've done with my own children, and that's all I can speak to, is my kids are very well aware of what's running through their veins. If I can't prevent them from struggling. People ask me all the time, my kids are young adults and they're of drinking age, blah, blah, blah. And they ask me, does it ever bother you to see them drinking? And my answer is always no, because I can't make my story theirs, and they have their own chapters to write. And so whether or not, I would rather throw myself in front of a car than my kids struggle with this disease, but I also can't prevent it. All I can teach them is what it did to my life, which they witnessed as young girls. And if they ever get to the point where they need help, they sure as hell know where they can come to find it. We owe it to the next generation and the generations after them. We owe it to them to talk to them about addiction. We owe it to them to have open conversations about grandparents and parents or siblings, uncles, anyone that has struggled in the family with substance use. The more we don't talk about it, the more we perpetuate the shame and guilt that surrounds this disease. We have to talk about it. I don't want to talk about my mom in a bad light, because she did the best she could, because her father was also an alcoholic. But I also have to be honest about their grandmother and what was running through her veins, and their great grandfather. My brother is in recovery. My nephew is in recovery. I mean, you could probably line up my family and all the generations that I don't even know of that struggled, and I guarantee you there would be a pretty long line.
Steve, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, I do, Mace. First of all, Carrie, you're just an unbelievable spokesperson for this entire issue. And Mace, I think you probably remember back in the late 80s, your suggestion when ABC was attempting to get rights to the NCAA basketball tournament. I went out to the Betty Ford Center with Dick Schultz, and I spent 4 days as if I was within the entire community. I lived in one of the homes there with all of the various patients while they went through their treatment. And ABC was an unbelievable experience for me. I had so many major opportunities to see and do unbelievable things, but that experience still rates right at the top. And the point that I want to make is that I would have had no idea the struggle that you, Carrie, and you, Mace, and everyone else who goes through treatment once, twice, 3, 4 times is going through, how everybody works together and pulls together to get the result that everybody wants for each other. And it was such an emotional, beautiful, amazing experience to spend just a 4 or 5 day period with all of those struggling, recovering alcoholics, and the way they base it for people that have just come in. I know you know this, Carrie and Mace. but the group is made up of people who've just come in and are already beginning the process, but still in denial. And the group that's been there for 20 or 25 days or more and knows that they're full of baloney, and how they interact to get to the result that ends up hopefully at the end of 28 days, in many cases, obviously a lot longer. But for me, though I was not a patient, it was one of the most meaningful experiences of my ABC sports life and of my entire life.
Well, thank you for sharing that. You know, for you to get a glimpse inside the walls of such a sacred place. You know, I know sometimes the mystery of treatment centers, and they can sound institutional and you know, but really inside those walls is a really sacred place where people are doing some incredibly deep soul searching, open heart, incredibly honest work. And very few people ever get to see the inside and get a glimpse of that. And I think most people in your position would come out feeling incredibly touched.
And that work continues because we have this project that Carrie and I and others are working on in conjunction with SVG that is basically a partnership with the media networks, content providers to make them to promote where help is available. And we have a partnership with Hazel and Betty Ford. And I can tell you without quoting numbers or anything like that, it is a very successful partnership. COVID put a lot of people into some very strange and unusual situations that they weren't used to. And so the partnership that we in the sports broadcasting industry have formed with the Betty Ford Center has really helped people find a little bit of support and hope. And I got to tell you, I'm so proud of people like Carrie and the people involved, Ken Agard and that group with SVG. It's we're doing the best we can. Who else has a question, comment? Just raise your hand. Doug, go ahead.
Well, this has been a fascinating time, Carrie. Thank you so much. There's an organization that I came connected with called Hope Rock. You heard about it at all?
I haven't. What is it?
Well, it's preventing people from who are addicted from getting too depressed. I'll put it that way, and getting to be almost suicidal. They're trying to reach out to people who are addicted. What I really wanted to ask you was if you could explain it. You explained your situation with your mother, and that you hated alcohol. So how did the transition happen where you started to be your mother apparently?
Yeah, it's funny. I became everything that I hated.
Just had the first drink or some? Did you drink when you were competing at all?
I drank a little bit back then. I hate to say it, but my first drink was definitely on a national team trip. But that was many years ago, before there was any code of conducts in place. Like, a lot of that stuff has changed over the decades, certainly. But the reality is, I think the pilot light, like I always view it as like this little pilot light that you have on your gas stove or your gas fireplace. I think that pilot light for me was probably lit since I was born. And, after, like when I was in college, I look back at school and I think, did I drink differently than the other athletes? And, I think athletes have this mentality that we work hard and we play hard and we deserve it. And we've earned, getting drunk tonight and all these things, which, most people can handle, right? But I have this pilot light lit because of my genetic predisposition, unaware of that. And then really, I went through many years after college where alcohol was not really super present in my life. I mean, I think my husband and I would share a bottle of wine and it would last us 3 or 4 days. I mean, it was not a huge part of our life. And then, when we had small kids And we, like most couples, we associated with many other families that had children our age. We kind of raised them all together, but we drank a lot. The parents would have the kids all playing and we were all drinking cocktails. And, you know, every single person in that group to this day has not become an alcoholic. But for me, it started really turning up the heat on that pilot light. Like, it was kind of like the pilot light's on and then you switched it to low. And then, you know, we would be drinking Friday and Saturday night. And then, you know, on Thursday, I'd kind of say, oh, I would like to go have a glass of wine while I cook dinner. And then pretty soon it was every night. And then pretty soon I was kind of hiding from my husband how much I was drinking. And, you know, so I believe that pilot light was always lit. I really believe that I was always going to be an alcoholic. Women tend to be later bloomers in this disease, so it wasn't uncommon for me to be in my 40s. And the other thing is, it happens much faster for women because the way we metabolize alcohol, the way our bodies are built compared to a male, the disease just happens much, much quicker for us. So really within a couple years, I was really kind of getting, the bottom was starting to go lower and lower. You know, I remember thinking that my consequences were happening faster than I could actually like lower my standards. Like, I don't remember saying ever in my life that it would be acceptable to drink at 7 o'clock in the morning. Yet there I was having a drink at 7 o'clock in the morning because I was so violent. I was so sick and in withdrawal that it was the only way for me not to be that sick. So you get in this hamster wheel where you can't get off, right? That's the progression of the disease. You know, I didn't just wake up one morning and I drank 7 days a week. I mean, at the end of my disease, I was living alone in my home with all the blinds closed, hiding bottles in my house from nobody. And I didn't know if it was light or day unless I looked out the blinds.
Oh my gosh.
What a story.
I will add to that a story that a lot of you have heard, some of you even experienced firsthand when I was drinking. But to reinforce the point that Carrie's making, and neither one of us are clinicians, but we do have valid experience that we can discuss. I was a blackout drinker. Most of you didn't know it, but I was. And in the early 80s, we won the Emmy for the best produced live series telecast from Wimbledon for NBC. Best produced, right? To this day, I have zero recollection of being in London for that show. I was there 3 weeks. Zero.
Saying that once.
So it's an insidious disease, and it's people like Carrie who are going to help us all.
Thank you for sharing some of your story, and Carrie, thank you for sharing, and proud of both of you for finding a way to manage your addictions. And Carrie, so pleased that you've dedicated your life to helping others. And in that vein, those of us who have friends or family that are dealing with addiction, how do we help them before they hit rock bottom, or can we help them?
Sure. I mean, I don't really subscribe to the notion or the saying that they have to really want it and hit rock bottom before they can get help, because the reality of this disease is rock bottom is death. And so I believe we can raise the bottom to people that we love, that we know and love and care about. And what I mean by that is don't ignore it. Talk to them, tell them, I'm concerned about your drinking. I'm concerned that you're drinking too much. I'm concerned that you seem to be isolating a lot. You're not showing up to events. We have to pull the covers back on this, right? And they're not going to like it. And that's okay. You can come after it with love and with grace. And you can use really uplift. Language matters when it comes to this disease. We have to use, you know, what I tell people is, I am so proud of you for being, for considering getting some help. I'm so proud of you for starting to acknowledge that there potentially can be a problem. It's so brave of you to receive help. There's so many positive and uplifting words and language that we can use, but the most important thing is you have to talk about it, because if my family had been okay with me, you know, under a table on a random Tuesday drunk all the time, I would never have gotten sober. And this disease, there's without question, if I had not gotten sober when I did, I would not be here. I would have died.
Wow.
And so I think it's super important to pull back those covers, but we do it from a place that comes from love and compassion, understanding. Even when you want to rip their heads off, there's no one that hates the alcoholic and addict more than the alcoholic and addict themselves. You can't hate them more than nobody hated me more than I hated myself. I mean, so by the time I got sober, pretty much everyone hated me, and it didn't really matter because I got it. I understood why everyone hated me, because I couldn't stand me. So we all need someone. We all need someone. And that someone was my dad. He never gave up on me. And when at my dad's funeral, I stood up and said, my dad gave me life and he also saved my life. There are certain things I do every day that contribute to my sobriety, and there are many, many things that do. And that could be as simple as going for a run, taking a walk, with my kids. There's many things that contribute to my sobriety today. How hard is it? I wouldn't say that I ever feel white knuckled or that I'm just like barely hanging on to a thread. Frankly, I don't really have the desire to drink right now, but I also never get complacent in my recovery, because my disease, I know for sure, is, outside my door, running laps and staying fit and ready to burst down the door if I ever crack that thing open. So I think for me, I've kind of made, my disease is an active living thing inside of me. It's not gone. And it progresses with me just as well as, and grows just as much as my sobriety does. And so I just have really acknowledged the presence, and that part of me will always exist. But I've also kind of made friends with the enemy, if you will, right? So if I go into a store and all the neon lights seem to be shining bright on the wine cabinet, I can say, not today, my friend. It's a living, breathing part of who I am. And I have to, the more I try to say it's not, that doesn't work for me. For me, I have to just embrace it as part of, it's as much a part of me as being an elite athlete was, as loving my children, as being a wife, being a mom, all these things that matter. My disease is as much a part of me as all of those things.
And Carrie and I are blessed to have a global network of support from people like us who get together on a regular basis and talk about how we stay sober. And so for us to be able to avail ourselves of that global network of support, 12-step meeting, etc., is a blessing, a real blessing. Well, Carrie, I'm proud to say in front of all these friends of mine how much I honor and love you, and how proud I am to be able to work with you to help on a daily basis communicate important information to people who need it. I'm proud to be your friend. I'm proud to work with you, and I have high hopes for much more work that we're going to get done together that we've already talked about at length. Thank you for sharing your time with me and my pals. This group right here has been through a lot together, and I am blessed to be a member of this group. And Carrie, I think maybe we may have you back someday. So thanks again.
Thank
Absolutely.
you so much for having me, Jeff. I love you. Thank you so much. And if any of you guys are involved in 2028 LA and you need some volunteers, count on me. I want to go. I want to be a part of it since it's in LA. So if anyone's on any of the committees, just loop me in if you need some help.
I will. I promise.
I guarantee you Donna will.
I sure will.
I think John hung up, but but so spread the word to John too, because I know, and Janet, because I know they're heavily involved. So
I will, I promise.
Thank you,
All right,
Carrie.
thank
That was
so
really,
much.
that was really a
Wonderful.
powerful discussion. We appreciate you
Thank you,
joining
Carrie.
us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a great day.